Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Brand, author of Magnum Creed. Today I'm joined with Rose,
Hi, everyone.
and today we're talking about the 7 reliability issues you can have with semi autos, usually because it's your fault. Now, that doesn't mean that semi auto guns are unreliable. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't pick one. But if you're a new time gun buyer, which a lot of people are because of the coronavirus pandemic, they also can't get training at the moment. Um, that's something to consider if you're weighing out your options between getting a semi-auto or a revolver, or if you already bought your semi-auto. These are some things to be mindful of, which are new little, let's say, safety device, your safety devices. These things, they're powerful. They can hurt you, and if you haven't done a lot of research on uh, videos and stuff where there are a lot of encounters, you find that if you do your research, there's two kinds of or three kinds of what ifs, right? That you prepare for. There's the one that definitely happens, is documented, you catch it on video all the time. It happens often enough, and you should be aware of it and treat it as something that can definitely happen to you. And when the time comes that you unfortunately might have to use your pistol. Then you have number two. Number two is when you have things that aren't as documented because let's say they're domestic, they happen in the house, uh, definitely happen, but you don't get them on camera as much because of the nature of what happens. You hear about them, but you never often see it, and these are things that also get brushed over. And a lot of these things get brushed over because people just they just train more. But like I said, you can't train at the time if you're a new shooter because of the pandemic in a lot of areas, or you might not have the money. And then number three, uh, you have the stuff that most of it's hypothetical. It's almost never happens, and when it does, it's because someone's in a different position, like they're a police officer. They're the aggressor in the situation. So it's not that it never happens, but there's usually some very circumstantial stuff to deal with when it does. I'm not talking about that stuff today. I'm talking about the stuff that you do hear about and see very often. These things you should be aware of because they do happen and they're problems when you have a semi-automatic gun. Once again, training and practice can get you over this, but it's something you should be aware of because not everybody gets to training and practice. Some people they pick it up, they say they're going to train and practice, and then it goes in their drawer or they put it on their hip every day, and they never use it. So that being said, let's get into it. Number one is going to be the manual safety that's on a lot of guns. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The one that you have to manually switch on and off.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. On the side, there's usually, some guns have a manual safety. Not all of them semi-automatics or autoloaders, but a lot of them have these manual safety features. You can switch it on, switch it off. You don't have to use it, but sometimes you can automatically engage it, and sometimes a lot of times you see this on videos all the time with shootings and self-defense situations. People forget to disengage it. So they pull it out, they point it, and then they go to pull the trigger,
Oh,
and
and the
nothing
safety's
happens,
on.
and the safety's on, and they get screwed. Number two is an empty chamber. So, intentional or not, the
Mm-hmm.
chamber can be empty. This happens all the time too. People don't carry it around in the chamber because they're scared of shooting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You see very common people leave the chamber empty, and then when they're ready to use it, they pull the gun
They
up
forget.
and they forget that there's nothing in the chamber, or they go to load something and then they have a problem because all their adrenaline's pumping and they're fiddling
And
with
they haven't
fine,
practiced.
well, not even practice, but they're fiddling with fine mechanisms of your fingers, and they're not good into gripping it at the moment. And by the time that they do get around to doing that, somebody jumped up and tried to grab your gun, and now you're in a fight over your gun. That's where you don't want to be. Number three is going to be the unintentional loaded chamber. Now, once again, these are things that don't really happen when you're dealing with revolvers. So, this is an unintentional loaded chamber. That is, you didn't know that there was a bullet in the chamber. Happens all the
Mm.
time. Very
Okay.
documented. People in gun stores complain about it all the time. Someone brings in a gun. They ask, is the gun empty? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, it's empty. And then they take the gun and they open it up. Bullet
Oh,
flies out.
right.
because the bullet can be seated into the thing and you not notice it. You can
Yeah.
open it. It could be there's little crevices bullets can hide, and when
And
you
you can
open it,
take the magazine out and still have a bullet in the chamber,
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's the normal way. But
Yeah.
I mean that bullets can hide or move and stuff, and sometimes you're just like, psh, and it pops out. Um, it happened to me with a empty cartridge. Now there wasn't a bullet inside anymore. It was
Oh.
just an empty shell, but it still was hidden somewhere in there, and I didn't know. And I'm like,
Right.
what the hell? Lucky I wasn't using it for self defense or waving it around. I mean, once again, this
Yeah.
empty cartridge couldn't have did anything, but it's something to be mindful of. It's not. These are things that you're thinking about semi-automatics. You don't really have this issue with revolvers.
Right.
So if people are weighing between having a revolver and a semi-automatic, these are, you know, things to be aware of because a lot of people don't think of this if they're not familiar. You know, people who get around guns all the time, they get so familiar with them that they're like, yeah, what the hell you mean? You don't know that? What kind of idiot doesn't know
Right.
that? And some people, they're not familiar enough. They don't know. And if they don't get the training, it's a bad way to find us all the surprise when you shoot your cat and, because you thought there wasn't a round in the chamber and you
Right.
decided to do some dry firing practice. And number that, which leads me to number 4. You might wonder, why would somebody want a manual safety? Some guns don't come with them, right? Number 2, empty round in the chamber. Why would you do that? Just keep a round in the chamber. And number 3, unintentional loaded chamber. Why wouldn't you have a round? Once again, round in the chamber. Well, that's because of number 4, shooting yourself.
Right.
That's way more likely to happen, and it happens. It happens with people who are familiar. Firearms instructors. There's a very famous video of a guy teaching a firearms instructing class, and he shoots himself in the leg. There's
Oh, wow.
people. There's tons of videos. Once again, these are the things that they happen
yeah.
enough that we have well documented evidence of people screwing up this way, and it's sad when it happens to them, and it's no joke when it does happen to them. But it's a lot of people brush it off and say, "Oh, they didn't do the right training. They didn't get the stuff they were
That's not
supposed to
gonna
have."
happen to
They
me.
keep brushing it off.
Right.
Not doing what you're supposed to. But that's when they get to the right information of telling people what to do, what they're supposed to. But before you get there, these are common occurrences, even to people who are experienced. They get these. So I remember one guy telling me when I was in class, he said, hey, you want a gun that's or a holster that's going to have retention, and he showed me the button and all that stuff. Well, one of the famous retention holsters, they call them retention because you have to do something to take the gun out.
Oh, so you'd have to take the
Like
strap off
like
or
if you have
whatever?
a cap thing where you
Okay.
pop it at the top or a button to push or whatever. Well, there was a very famous Serpa. It's called Serpa. You press the button on the side and pull the gun up. Well, so many people shot themselves like that because after pressing that button, they pulled the gun up and their finger was still in that pressing motion, and they hit the trigger and shot themselves in the leg. Very common occurrence.
Gotcha.
And it's like I said, well, the argument is not just Serpa holsters that people do it. Some people adjust their gun, and there was a guy at Chuck E. Cheese who shot himself in the crotch a year or two
wow.
ago because he was trying to adjust himself. I don't know if he was in the bathroom or not, but at the Chuck E. Cheese, adjust his holster and boom, shot himself in the. Because a lot of these guns, because people always teach you, no manual safety. They teach you don't keep it round in the chamber and all that stuff. And we'll
Always be ready to
Yeah,
fire.
always be ready to fire. Well, then you were ready to shoot yourself. And not to mention all the people who say appendix carry, and now you didn't shot yourself in the nuts.
Right.
So
Yeah.
happy birthday to you, and not to any of your future children because you won't have any more. Then you have the 5th one, which I think is very understated. And you're probably looking at this like, what is that? What is that? I don't know. I haven't heard of that.
wristing.
Yeah, it's called limp wristing. If you're familiar, if you're a big Glock enthusiast or very familiar with Glock, you've probably had to defend against or heard the term limp wristing. This happens in a lot of the more modern striker fired pistols or whatever.
Oh.
Basically, what happens is these guns operate from the force of the bullet coming out of it, so it makes the slide go back. Well, if you don't hold the gun the right way when that's happening, if you're limp wristing, some people say if a girl has like a weak handle on her or they're scared of the way, like if the shot scares them,
Yeah.
which would happen with a lot of new firearm owners, they limp wrist the gun and it gets jammed.
Oh.
Or it doesn't cycle the way it's supposed to because the slide's not moving the way it's supposed to. I'll also add to this, and this has happened. I've noticed too with guns. I'll add this to the wrist thing. I won't add this as something else. But some gun semi-automatics don't function if they're not lubed very well. Now, a lot of people would think, well, duh. Once again, but this is people who are new to guns. They might
Yeah,
not know
brand new.
about oiling and lubing and all that stuff. They might think it just works, should work just fine out of the box, and it might.
2 months ago, I would have thought the same thing.
Yeah, it might just, if you're not, when you first get it, but some guns need more lube than others. That's another thing. I know one gun, 1911s. I've noticed double action ones might need more than striker fired. And speaking of some guns doing things others don't do, number 6 is incompatible ammo. Some guns are known as ammo eaters. Some are known as way more temperamental low ammo you feed them. Very temperamental. A lot of guns don't take the most popular self-defense ammo. They just don't.
Okay.
And they say the only way for people to learn that is to shoot that ammo in your gun. But a lot of people aren't going to shoot hundreds of rounds of that very expensive ammo in their gun. They're going to shoot a bunch of the stock ammo. They might shoot let's say at the max, one full magazine or one full box. And that's if they're being really, really, free with their money. They might shoot a whole box of their carry ammo through their gun, and then, they'll, okay, we're good. And then that might work on that day, but let's say there's a little hiccup in the gun, it might not function as good. Full metal jackets feed a lot better in the guns than hollow points do. And most people use hollow points for self-defense, and they use a lot of them. Some people even use that what do you call it, really fancy specialty ammo. Like, I know there's a RIP ammo that I always see people buy, and it doesn't do much of anything, but what it will do for a lot of guns is give it a good hiccup. It'll stop it from cycling the right way, because the bullets are funny shaped. A lot of these funny shaped bullets, when you shoot it through your gun, can cause the gun to not feed the right way, because there's not a smooth surface on the bullet. Anyway, so that's something to really take into consideration, because it will really freaking suck to find out in the heat of the moment, oh, my gun doesn't use this ammo. Well, once again, something all gun owners should know, but that's not really a problem with revolvers. Not telling you to get a revolver, but that's not a problem with revolvers. Revolver, it shoots. If it fits in the thing, most of the time it shoots, unless you're using a too powerful of a load for the, like say if you're using a 38 special plus P and you don't have a plus P revolver, that might give you some trouble, but it just keeps spinning. It shoots, and even if you have a problem with the ammo, like if the ammo's going to get stuck, you'll find that later after you've emptied 7 rounds into your bad guy, or 6 or 5 or whatever you have in your revolver. You'll find it out later when you're trying to press them out of the ejector round. They might be a little snug in there, but you've gotten, most people don't end up reloading. If you reload, you're having a really bad day. That reloading would be more of the things that it happens, but you don't hear too much about it. And usually it's not even that you're reloading with semi-automatics. It's more that something's wrong with your magazine and you said fuck it and ejected it and slapped another one in. Then the 7 one, speaking of magazines, is a loose mag. Your magazine has to be really in there. And a lot of instructors will teach a tap and rack method, which is you slap the bottom of the magazine in.
Oh, just to make sure that it's
and then rack one more, rack it again. It's a habit you pick up by doing it a lot, so that boom, it's not working, tap rack, you're off, you're back in the fight. But some of the problems with that is, this is good for police because they're usually fighting at a bigger distance. They're the assailant. Their assailant's far away. If one of your hands is tied up, like pushing someone off of you,
Right. How are you supposed to
and
do that?
you can't really always do the tapping right now. You can slap it on your stomach and maybe rack it on your holster or belt, or so you can do some trick shit in the moment, but you don't want to rely on that in the moment. It might not be available to you. And that's once again something you don't have to worry about with revolvers. Now, this wasn't a big advertisement for revolvers. I do like revolvers, but the thing is, these are things you should be aware of. A lot of people will say, "Oh, modern, semi-automatics are super reliable. There's nothing wrong with them." These are all problems that you see all the time. These aren't imaginary leprechaun problems that from what was Paul Harrell say, the "What If Brigade." Like, these
Yeah.
aren't crap that never ever 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 happened. This is stuff that you see. If you go on maybe Active Self Protection or some other weird, video analysis site, and you watch these shows, you'll notice certain things are very repetitive. You're like me, which I used to be a journalist, and I went through, which my writing doesn't show it, but I went through, all these different crimes and stuff like that. You notice, you see a very common thread of why things go wrong, and very often it's the gun it was a semi-automatic and it didn't fire when they pulled the trigger. It's very common. They pull a gun out, they want to defend themselves, and the only thing that went wrong was when they pulled the trigger, the gun jammed. Sometimes it's the bad guy. Bad guys are known to use the cheapest guns they can find. They're not typical gun enthusiasts all the time,
Right.
and they very often get some piece of crap that's not working the way it should.
Easy to throw something away if you didn't pay much for it.
Oh no, they do pay a lot for it. They pay more.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of bad guys. Because imagine you get somebody gets a $200 gun, and you say, okay, I'll give you double the money for it, and you're like, cool. Right. That's how you get straw man purchases, because the bad guy's willing to pay twice the amount of money to get their hands on the gun. Somebody's going to take that money. There's some degenerate motherfucker on the corner with a sign that doesn't have a record that is totally willing to do way worse than buy you a gun for a good amount of money. So that's one thing to always keep in mind when you're dealing with these semi-automatics. You want to have a place in plan, or a plan in place for these different things. Manual safety. Are you going to practice with that manual safety? Are you going to keep a round in the chamber? Are you going to always check your gun when you look at it? Always check it. Are you going to, have steps in place to prevent yourself from shooting yourself? Maybe make sure you have a decent holster. Not one of those soft things that can bend and hit the trigger. Maybe you do use the safety every time you holster. You shouldn't rely on it, but that's another thing you can do if you're going to practice with it. If you're don't have a safety, a lot of people shoot themselves with Glocks. They don't have safeties. And it's very common gun to shoot yourself in the crotch with.
Wow.
Well, because they're tech, a lot of them are tactitards and like to stuff their gun in their, against their nutsacs to get that extra half a second on the, the draw. And then, but that one time they weren't paying attention, or their shirt got stuck in their holster or something, and they stuck it in there the wrong way, and there goes their,
right.
Their artery. But have places in plan for that. Maybe get a hard Kydex holster, or maybe, practice reholstering when it's empty to just make sure you got this whole setup. Then you have limp wristing. Make sure you put a few rounds down your thing. Now, once again, like I said, some people aren't going to get that practice, so they're not going to know when they're limp wristing, or just have incompatible ammo. They might not shoot enough to know the difference, but also shoot that ammo through your gun to make sure it works. And of course, maybe practice the tap and rack method for in case you have loose ammo. Something that will help a lot with these is what they call that ammo, the snap caps. The ammo that doesn't, they're not real rounds. They're not even, I don't want to say dummy rounds, because those are like the banger things. Just use the use the practice bullets. They're called snap caps. You tap, rack, bullet flies out, gives you the idea of what your gun's going to behave like in the situation. but always, get some practice in and be mindful that you have a firearm, it's deadly, and you can't hurt somebody. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. This did maybe sound like 7 more reasons to get a revolver, but it wasn't, honest. But it is something to put into perspective and weigh out if you're not practicing or planning on doing any real training. Revolvers still need training. In fact, they need training in other ways. It's just that as far as a safety issue goes, if you're not going to be doing too much with it, they're much more simple to use. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and peace.
Thanks for watching or listening, guys.
Oh yeah, this is great. This is so
It's miserable.
enthusiastic. Bye.